What is going on, guys? It's Travis. We're back with another Hero's Journey YouTube live stream. And in today's YouTube live stream, we're going over another super controversial subject. Should you use a traction pad on these things right here? See those tails? They are naked AF, and that is for good reason. Now, we all grow up, we see the pros, everyone's got traction pads on their board. Now, why do you think that is? Do you think that is just necessarily because everyone needs a traction pad? Do you think that we're just kind of solidified in the surf culture that they're like super important because they have a super, a purpose that is needed by everyone? Um, I'm going to play devil's advocate here and say, no, I don't think they are. And I think actually traction pads are holding back your surfing. And let me explain why. So I can't really remember when I started not using a traction pad. I used to always use a traction pad on all these, beautiful tails right here. Each of these had a traction pad, not these boards in particular, but I would ride it with a traction pad. Now, you got to find your brand, which type, etc. That works best for you. But when you're using a traction pad, in your mind, you're thinking like that tail block, that big tail block at the end, that extra grip, that's kind of helping you surf the board better. Now, again, it could be, but at the same time, I don't think it is. I don't think it is because I can't remember when exactly I started riding no traction pad, but let me tell you, once you go no traction pad on one of these, there ain't no going back. There's no going back. What happens is you really start to feel the board back there. Once your foot kind of feels it and you get used to being able to kind of move your foot around and just that board feel, I think that overrides the actual traction that you would actually feel here. A track pad to me now, when you get so used to being able to move your foot a little bit around on your back foot, you ride a traction pad, and what happens is your foot almost gets kind of caught. It's on the traction pad, and it almost gets a little too stuck, and you're trying to move it, and it's just stuck there. It's like you have some foo wax, and it's the stickiest foo wax out. Now, and it's pretty night and day. Once you get used to being able to move your back foot around a little bit, and you ride a board with a traction pad, you're immediately going to be disappointed. Now, what happens to a lot of people is they start surfing and right away, they see everyone with the traction pad. They put on a traction pad. And I think it's almost a little bit of a handicap because that traction pad is kind of a guide to where to put your back foot. You ask a lot of people, why do you like using a traction pad on your surfboard? And a lot of people are going to say because it helps them know where to put their back foot. They have their back foot. If it's too far up, it's not going to be on the pad. If they push it back, they can feel the pad. It's almost like an action. It's feedback to know where your back foot is. So in that case, it's a bit of a handicap because you're relying on the traction to tell you by the haptic feedback where to put your back foot, as opposed to you putting your back foot somewhere on the back of that board that feels natural while riding the wave. And this also kind of gets into two other kind of subcategories here, is if you're a front foot surfer or a back foot surfer. I think back foot surfers do actually benefit a little more from having a pad on the back of the board here. Now, because when you're a back foot surfer and you're going to put your foot all the way back here, your back foot is going to do most of that work when you do a turn, when you're pumping up and down. Now, when you're a front foot surfer, and you'll kind of, one way I can tell if you're a front foot surfer, or you can tell yourself if you're not sure, you ever try to do a turn and your front foot flies off and the board smacks you in the face? I think that's an easy indicator because your foot slid off and your foot wasn't bringing the board around. That's why the board hit you in the face. If you're a back foot surfer and your foot slides off, the board will probably still move around a little bit. So that's an easy way to kind of know if you're more front heavy or back heavy. Another easy way to know is if you prefer more volume at the nose of the board. If you prefer more volume in the middle of that board, that's actually a good indicator too that you want to push on your front foot. So, you know, so why on no traction? Why aren't you just sliding your foot back off of the board? Because I don't think you're actually using that upright thing on the traction to push on. It seems like you are because it makes the most sense ever. Like the back of the board, you have a big top thing right here. You're gonna use friction and push on that. If you're a back foot surfer, yeah, maybe. But at the same time, you're not really pushing that way. You're pushing with your heel this way or this way. So that uprise, it could like help you to keep your foot locked in to push against, but at the same time, you're more so pushing heel or toe. So it could help you not have your foot go off the back of the board, which has happened to me recently because when the water gets so warm, the wax gets kind of melty, and that can be an issue with you have to have the right kind of wax when you do go naked, no traction. But what I've learned is that when you don't have the traction on there and you're not relying on that brick at the back or even just the middle ground or even the hump to kind of lock your foot in, you're not really losing that much when you take that away. And it's pretty obvious when you ride a traction board and no traction board, like it's going to feel really different. But once you get used to that no traction board and then you try to ride a traction, you're going to be like thrown off and you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be a happy camper. Because what happens is the traction actually does too good of a job and your foot gets stuck. It gets stuck in this spot and you can't do these little micro movements that you got to do to help you pump faster, to help you kind of adjust, etc. So again, all the pros, a lot of them are riding traction pads. So again, this is a kind of like a tongue-in-cheek look at this, but I think it's interesting how, like I personally have gotten so used to no traction pad on a board that when I buy a used board or have a board with a traction pad, I end up having to rip it off even after trying it for a while because I really value being able to move this back foot just around a little bit, these little micro steps. And especially on a lot of these kind of newer boards people are making that are kind of supposed to be a twin fin, but maybe they're not, or they're a 2+1. So you actually don't need to have your foot all the way back. And I don't want the traction pad to tell me where to put my foot. I like being able to like feel the board, front foot and back foot. If I go up on the board some, it's wax. I'm feeling the board around the back foot. I don't want the traction there to teach me or tell me, oh, your foot's too far forward, too far back. Oh, I got to move it back. It's like one more additional thing to add to the equation of, all right, where's my back foot? Where's my front foot, etc. So I think it's a pretty interesting concept because you don't see a lot of people choosing to ride no traction. They automatically use the traction pad. And, even the Wavestorm, shout out Wavestorm, comes with a built-in traction pad. So I think it's become part of the identity of surfboards is that you get a traction pad. It's like the fins and the leash. You get all these things. But what I think is super cool and interesting is that once you really fine tune your array of no traction pads, like you just first of all they look cooler. I mean, actually I don't know, they might not look cooler because it's like kind of dirty wax. It's not as cool. Don't look at the mashup. Poor mashup's like it needs a new wax job bad. It's actually kind of new. It's just dirty. But you get so used to like the non-traction feeling. You get on a traction board and you're just like, oh no, I don't want this. But you do have to, I think, go through the using a traction phase, not using it, and kind of see what you like. And again, if you're using a traction and it's working great for you, just keep doing it. But don't rely on the type of board. This is why long boards generally don't have a traction pad because you want to move your foot up, back, down, around, and it's less about where your back foot or front foot is, more about where you want to go. And you're not necessarily having trouble turning a longboard because of the lack of traction pad. It's because the board's kind of big and you have to surf it differently But longboards, you generally have to surf more on your back foot. So, why don't longboards have traction pads? Well, it's because you need to have that board feel to walk up and down and do these little micro movements. Where a traction pad, it really does limit you, and your foot can get a little stuck up. I think booties kind of playing this as well. I think when you have booties on, it's a little less prevalent, like to how it's affecting your back foot. When you don't have booties on, and you're just, your foot's back here, especially on like a board like this twin fin, it's not that much room back here. So I really like to be able to kind of just put my foot, same with the mashup, put your foot wherever you need to, wherever you're feeling like the back foot needs to go to move the board correctly. And when you kind of trick your brain into knowing that, oh, I don't need to rely on this traction pad to just, choose where my foot's going to go, it's a lot more of a freeing feeling. And it's, you become a wax expert as well, because you do not want to slip, and now you don't have any traction anywhere. So you're waxing that to high heaven in the back there. And again, it's rare that I've ever slipped off of the back of the foot because there's not some kind of like barrier like on a traction pad that pushes against it. It's only recently happened once or twice. It never happens, but when it happens, it's because the wax is like a gooey summer day, and the wax, even the hotter wax, can't handle it as much. So I think it's a really interesting kind of fun concept to dive into, because again, like, everyone uses traction pads. No one thinks twice about not using a traction pad. And I hope this video can kind of enlighten you a little bit to why maybe for you and your new board, a traction pad free life could be the life for you. So, all right, guys, thank you for tuning in to another Hero's Journey, focusing on the lack of traction pads and why, if you want to join the coolest club in the entire world, you got to go rip that traction pad off, and you goo gon it off, and you get that thing out of here. Because once you live that free solo surfer life of no traction pad, there ain't no going back. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in again to another Hero's Journey live stream with the focus on some surf tips and surf characteristics, surfing stuff for everyone. Smash that subscribe, smash the like, notify, drop a comment. Why are you addicted to your traction pad? Could you join the No Traction Pad clan, or do you have to stay with traction pad life? And you're like, dude, what are you talking about? You're crazy. This makes no sense, and I have to dislike. But let me know why. And thanks again for tuning in. Till next time, peace.